Revealed, 7 spine-chilling true horror tales from Reddit that are haunted and cursed. The night was thick with fear as shadows loomed over Maplewood, a suburb that seemed so safe just days before. Yet, in a dimly lit room, Jake sat huddled with his phone, eyes wide as he scrolled through terrifying stories on Reddit. Each tale gripped him tighter, twisting his insides. Stories of neighbors who hid dark secrets, the kind that made your skin crawl and heart race. He couldn't shake the thought that perhaps their world wasn't as perfect as it appeared. "Mom! You need to see this." Jake's voice broke the stillness. Sarah, pushing through the fatigue of the diner's evening rush, looked over. "It's just scary stories, honey," she chuckled, trying to quell the unease gnawing at her own gut. But Jake's intensity was undeniable. "You don't understand. There are things happening around here we aren't safe." Initially, she laughed it off. Who would believe that the friendly neighbors with their easy smiles could be hiding sinister secrets? Yet with each croak of the wind, every rustle of branches shook away her comfort. She rolled her eyes but couldn't help but lean in, the stories igniting a flicker of doubt. Then came the whispers. Muffled voices slipping through windows at midnight, chilling her to the core. Sarah tried to tell herself it was the wind, but deep down, she knew there was something eerily wrong. Jake, now frantic, struck up conversations with neighbors, finding layers of stories that wove together conspiracies, tales of lost children, and actions wrapped in shadows. "Mom, remember Tommy? The kid who disappeared 5 years ago?" he asked one night, his voice trembling. "I found his old missing poster. He lived just down the block. No one even talks about him anymore." Panic seized her heart. "Now you're really scaring me, Jake. It's just a story." But every time they walked by the nearby homes, a chill skittered down her spine. The couple they shared holidays with, smiling through BBQs, began to look different. What if their laughs were masking something? The thought wormed its way in, feeding on her fears. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. The final straw broke when they spotted a neighbor digging late one night. She tried to brush it off as just yard work, but the darkness swallowed the truth whole. Calling it paranoia didn't make it lighter. Then they stumbled upon an old book in the attic. Stories of witchcraft rooted deep in their quaint little town, chilling her blood as reality began to form a nightmarish tapestry. When midnight arrived with a swift knock through the house, Sarah's heartbeat thundered in her ears. She shared a petrified glance with Jake, crouching under the kitchen table. What lay beyond the door? Monsters or neighbors? Their cozy home disintegrating into a tableau of fear. The realization hit her hard, the once treasured safety of Maplewood was cracking at its seams. What were they hiding? And were they next? The knock came again, a series of frantic raps that echoed through the silence, sending a surge of adrenaline through Sarah. She clutched Jake closer, breath hitching in her throat. Each heartbeat felt like a countdown. "Mom, what do we do?" Jake whispered, his voice barely louder than a breath. His eyes were wide, mirroring her panic. "Shush," Sarah hissed, trying to assess the situation, her eyes darting to the door. Should they call for help? Or would that make them the next targets? The darkness outside seemed unfathomable. She could almost sense eyes watching them. "Who's there?" she finally called, her voice trembling despite her efforts to sound firm. Silence enveloped her question, thicker than the night air. Just as she opened her mouth to repeat it, a breathy voice answered from the other side, barely more than a whisper. "Let me in, I need help." Her stomach dropped. The voice was familiar, too familiar. It was Tommy's voice. The missing boy whose face haunted her nightmares. Panic twisted in her gut. "Stay down, Jake," she warned, gripping her son's arm tighter. "Is that Tommy?" Jake gasped, a mix of hope and dread in his eyes. "Don't listen. It can't be him," she snapped, barely keeping her fear under control. But every instinct screamed to open that door, to let the child who had vanished back into their home. Yet, the stories lingered in her thoughts, stories of those who had lured by false pleas, never to be seen again. The cold air nudged the door as if yearning to be opened. Each soft creak felt like a piercing scream in the heavy stillness. "Mom, please," Jake pleaded, his voice small. With each passing second, the fear of the unknown clawed at Sarah's resolve. What if it really is him? She thought. What if he needs us? But the more she pondered, the stronger the dread settled in her chest. Without warning, the whispers from earlier filled the air, circling their heads like an invisible fog. They called her name, drawing closer, murmuring secrets that chilled her blood. Help! It beckoned. Help! Suddenly, a loud crash came from the back of the house. They both jumped, adrenaline coursing through them as they exchanged terrified looks. The noise echoed through the tight corridors, growing louder. Sarah's heart raced. "Jake, we need to go. Now." She grabbed his hand and dashed toward the back of the house, pushing through the dining room. They could hear the faint sound of shuffling footsteps mixed with whispered chants. A fleeting glance revealed shadows moving through the corners of their vision, slick and dark, as if the very walls were alive with a malicious intent. What if it's just a neighbor? Jake strained to rationalize, but his face betrayed the truth. He didn't believe it. As they reached the back door, it lurched wide open. The darkness spilled in, smelling of damp earth and something else, something rotten. Sarah hesitated, heart pounding against her ribcage. Then she saw him. A figure emerging from the shadows, silhouetted against the oppressive night. Help! It was definitely Tommy, or so she thought. His expression was vacant, eyes sunken, yet filled with a haunting desperation. But the flicker of hope was doused by a wave of terror. Those haunting whispers wrapped around her, the neighbors' secrets beckoning like sirens. "Mom!" Jake shouted, dragging her back as the figure took a step forward, revealing the truth: the stitched wounds across his arms, the grimy clothes clinging to him like a second skin. "Run!" Sarah shouted, propelling them both towards the front of the house, the dark presence chasing them, growing closer with every second. As they dashed through the hall, the whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar. Just when they thought they'd escape, the floor grumbled underfoot, the very foundation of their home protesting against their flight. They crashed into the living room where another figure now stood waiting, a wide grin stretching across its face. "Where do you think you're going?" The words hung in the air, dripping with malice. In that moment, they realized they were not just afraid of what was outside. The darkness had seeped in, and the real horror lay in the suffocating grip of their neighbors or what they had become. What would they do next? Would they discover who had conjured this nightmare? And could they survive the evening in a town where trust had turned to horror? The figure in the living room loomed over them, its grin widening as if savoring their terror. The light from the flickering lamp cast grotesque shadows, illuminating its grotesque features, a patchwork of scars and stains that merged seamlessly into the facade of the neighbor they had once trusted. Sarah could barely breathe, the reality of their situation crushing her like a weight on her chest. "Mom, what is that?" Jake's voice trembled, pulling her focus back to her son. His little hand felt like ice in hers. "Stay close to me," she whispered, fighting off the panic threatening to swallow her whole. "They can't stay here. They needed a plan. Why don't you join us?" The figure crooned, tilting its head in a mocking display, the laughter echoing from nowhere and everywhere. "Get away from us!" Sarah shouted, adrenaline surging once more. She pushed Jake behind her, her heart thudding against her ribs like a wild animal desperate to escape. Then they heard it again. A steady thumping sound, relentless and close like a heartbeat that was becoming part of the walls. It throbbed in time with the whispers, creating a terrifying symphony that rattled their nerves. Sarah turned, assessing their options. To the left, the front door gaped, but would it lead to salvation or deeper horrors? "Come play," the figure sing-songed, stepping forward in a fluid motion. With each step, it transformed, shifting from that familiar neighbor into something far more grotesque, shifting like a mirage. "Sarah, let us go." Jake tugged her arm, his fear sparking her survival instincts. She frantically scanned the room, her eyes darting from the front door to the neighboring shadows undulating just beyond the windows. Suddenly, the door at the end of the hallway slammed shut, echoing through every dark crevice of their home. A cold breeze swept through as if the house itself sighed. "They're all out there," she muttered, her throat dry, a knot forming in her stomach. "Mom!" Jake cried, pulling her closer. "We can't let it get us." His whispered desperation fueled her determination. "Okay, we can't stay here," Sarah said, her voice steadier. "On the count of 3, we make a run for the door." Okay, Jake nodded, his chin quivering. 1. The figure sprawled out its arms, as if to catch them. 2. The whispers intensified, a cacophony of their neighbors' voices blending together. "Join us." They beckoned. "Stay forever." 3. Sarah shot forward, dragging Jake behind her as they raced for the front door. The darkness snatched at them, fingers of shadow reaching out, pulling at their heels as they barreled toward the exit. Just as they reached the threshold, a hand shot out from the darkness, grabbed her ankle, yanking her down. "No. Please." She screamed, falling hard. Jake shrieked, frantic tears spilling down his cheeks as he tugged on her arm with all his might, the boy desperately trying to pull her free of whatever had hold of her. "Mom! Get up!" With sheer strength born of desperation, she kicked at the phantoms grasping at her, finally shaking the grip loose. She scrambled to her feet, grabbing Jake in one swift motion. They surged through the door and into the night, the unforgiving chill wrapping around them like a vice. But the darkness wasn't finished. As they stepped outside, the sky crackled with angry clouds, and the whispers morphed into a loud roar, the house now a ravenous beast hungry for their return. Sarah turned back, her eyes wide with fear. "Mom, where do we go?" Jake cried, his small body trembling beside her. A flash of lightning illuminated the street, revealing figures lurking in the shadows, faces twisted in malice, resembling glimpses of their neighbors but darker, twisted into monstrous parodies of reality. "We run toward the ridge," she yelled, adrenaline making her voice more assured, even as her heart sank with dread at what lay ahead. As they dashed into the storm, shadows sprung to life around them, each turn revealing unnerving sights. Something was waiting for them, something that knew them well. They ran, but the game had just begun. What nightmare awaited them on that ridge? Would they discover the truth of their town's dark secret? Or would they become another tale of terror to haunt the night? Rain lashed down, drenching them as they sprinted toward the ridge, each step pounding on the wet earth echoed like a countdown. Lightning split the sky again, momentarily illuminating the twisted figures that loomed on the streets. The townsfolk, once familiar, now transformed into something grotesque and unrecognizable, their smiles revealing nothing but jagged teeth. "Mom, please!" Jake gasped, his thin chest heaving. He tightened his grip on her hand, refusing to let go. The wind howled, almost mocking them, as they ran. "Keep running," Sarah urged, her own breath short and ragged. They had to get to the ridge, to the woods that felt like a distant sanctuary, a place not yet touched by whatever horror had consumed their neighborhood. "Don't look back." But as they reached the edge of their property, Sarah risked a glance over her shoulder. The house still stood firm amidst the chaos, dark and gargantuan. The figure they had escaped seemed to peel away from the shadows, a fluid dancer slipping through the night. It wasn't just watching, it was waiting, savoring their fear. "Look out!" Lightning flashed again, illuminating a set of glowing eyes lurking in the bushes. A sound echoed through the crackle of thunder, a low, guttural growl that seemed to resonate through the ground beneath them. "Go!" she screamed, the instinct to protect her child overwhelming her. They dashed along the dirt path that led up the ridge, branches clawing at them as they pushed through the underbrush. With every step, their surroundings turned more sinister. The trees twisted into ugly shapes, and shadows clung to their trunks, as if clawing their way toward the pair. Chills crawled down Sarah's spine, and not just from the cold, it felt like something was slipping in around them, a suffocating darkness that threatened to consume her. "Are we going to be okay?" Jake's small voice broke through the crash of thunder, filled with a mix of fear and hope. "I promise, we'll be okay," she lied. It was all she could do to keep him moving. Every part of her mind screamed that they needed to get away, to find something, a weapon, a sanctuary, a sign that they weren't alone in this nightmare. As they reached the crest of the ridge, they paused, gasping for breath. The view below was staggering, but it felt wrong. The town was shrouded in fog, a pulsating blanket rolling slowly over the streets. And amidst it, figures darted here and their shadows moving as a uniform mass. "They're down there," Jake whispered, his wide eyes reflecting fear mixed with a deadly curiosity. "They're not just down there," Sarah corrected him, feeling a sense of dread pooling in her stomach. "They're watching us." Above the roar of the wind and the relentless rain, a familiar voice drifted up, echoing hauntingly. "Join us," it was a whisper, blending into the howling storm, leaving a cold pit of dread in her gut. "We need to keep going," Sarah said sharply, shaking off the fear. They had to move away from that voice, away from those beckoning shadows. But as she turned to lead Jake deeper into the wilderness, something caught her eye, a flicker. A candlelight in the distance. Soft yet inviting. It flickered with an odd stillness, contrasting with the angry storm around them. "What is that?" Jake asked, drawing closer to her side. "I don't know, but we need to find out," she said, her voice trembling as she took steps toward the light, drawn to it like a moth to a flame. What could be hiding at the source of that light? Was it salvation, or a lure that would lead them to their doom? With hearts pounding and shadows closing in, they edged closer, knowing the choice they made next could change everything. Sarah's heart raced in her chest, loud and insistent, drowning out the storm around them. The soft glow drew her in, a tiny beacon amidst the suffocating darkness. She fought against the instinct to shout out warnings, to steady her trembling resolve. What if it was more sinister than it appeared? "Stay close, Jake," she whispered, clutching his small hand tighter. Each step toward the light felt like a gamble. Shadows danced all around them, seeming to pulse with life, and the eeriness of the fog hung thick like a shroud. The candlelight flickered, revealing a figure sitting hunched beside it. As they stepped closer, details began to emerge. It was an old woman, her hair wild and silver, her clothes tattered. But it wasn't just the sight of her that unsettled them, it was the way she beckoned with one bony finger, her wide eyes fixed on Sarah and Jake. Come closer," her voice cracked, harsh against the thick rain. With every word, an echo seemed to vibrate through the ground, as if the earth itself whispered along. "Mom, I don't like her." Jake whimpered, the innocence in his voice tugging at Sarah's heart. She wanted to reassure him, to regain control, but dread twisted in her gut. "Wait, don't approach her just yet," Sarah said, forcing herself to think. The candle flickered again, and the dark shadows shifted, drawn to the light like moths to a flame, eager and hungry. Panic surged within her. She could feel it, the air thickening, as if time itself held its breath. "Please, I can help you," the woman croaked, her expression softening. "You need to shield yourselves. They are coming." "Who? Who is coming?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. A chill gripped her spine tighter, colder than the rain itself. Suddenly, the wind picked up, swirling around them like a sinister waltz, hounding away the warmth of the candle. The woman's eyes darkened, revealing a flicker of desperation. "You must choose wisely. The light will protect you, but you cannot linger. They feast on fear and they will find you." Let us go, Mom. Jake yanked on her arm, his voice trembling. With bravado that felt dangerously thin, Sarah stepped back, forcing herself to focus on Jake's wide, pleading eyes. Time seemed to compress, the moment stretched between the unsettling possibility of refuge and the relentless darkness that pressed against them. Are you coming? She called to the woman, desperately hoping for a sign, a move that could validate their hesitation. I cannot leave, the woman murmured, her tone laced with sorrow. The ridge here is all that's left of me. Banish your fear, for the monsters that hunt you thrive on it. A thunderous roar rumbled in the distance, drawing her attention back to the shadows at the edge of the woods. They were coming, fueled by the storm, hungry for both flesh and fear. The air crackled with an eerie energy. Mom! Jake pressed, fear spilling over as he pointed to the dark shape slipping through the trees, moving faster, gliding toward the flicker of the light. Run! Sarah shouted, instinct kicking in as her gut clenched with terror. They turned, pushing their legs to the limit, sprinting back into the darkness, away from the woman and her candle. Each step felt like running through thick molasses, shadows stretching, clawing at them. But the figures were not just behind them, they circled. The whispers grew louder, twisting through their minds, calling out to their fears. Where are we going? Jake cried as their feet sunk into soft earth, the treacherous ground working against them. Anywhere away from here. She didn't know where they would end up, only that they needed to run. Wandering deeper into the woods, she glanced over her shoulder, feeling the heat of glowing eyes on them, the thrill of terror wrapping around them with every heartbeat. The figures were silent now, closing in, blending with the whispers of wind. Sarah's breath became ragged as they neared a cluster of trees, a clearing just ahead. Then, she saw it that a door, a beat-up wooden door standing alone, half buried in the twisted roots of a massive tree, faintly glowing with an inviting warmth. What is that? Jake asked, his curiosity piqued despite the terror gripping him. I don't know, she breathed, quickening her pace. But it might be our only chance. As they reached the door, the shadows behind them lunged forward, the air sizzling with anticipation. Open it. Open it now. Jake's voice was a frantic plea, drowning in the noise of their pursuers. With trembling hands, Sarah grasped the handle, heart pounding, sweat pouring down her face. What lay beyond that door? Was it safety, or did it lead to another nightmare? In a world filled with terror, did they dare step through? The sound of her breath hitched as she turned the knob, voices closing in, echoing her fearful thoughts. Were they willing to pay the price? The door swung open inward, revealing darkness beyond dark. Mom, and just as the shadows closed in, Sarah made her choice. But what awaited them on the other side? The darkness swallowed them whole. Sarah hesitated at the threshold, the grotesque shadows barely a breath away. A rush of stale air hit her face, cold and clammy, like the grave. Mom! Jake whimpered, his small voice laced with panic. She could feel his tiny fingers trembling in her grip. With a breath heavy with dread, she pulled him through the door. They stumbled into a damp, musty space that smelled of wet earth and mildew. The door creaked ominously behind them, slamming shut as visceral chants erupted from the world outside, angry and demanding. Where are we? Jake asked, eyes wide, searching the inky black. Sarah pressed a trembling finger to her lips. She squinted into the darkness, the edges of an unseen space barely discernible. But there was something there, a glimmer deep within the shadows, pulsating softly, hinting at familiarity. Mom, I can't see anything. Jake's voice hitched, fear gnawing at their connection. Just hold on. We'll find our way. Her own voice felt distant, like a candle flame flickering in a storm. She took a breath to muster her courage and began to move forward, the ground squishing beneath her feet, making her stomach turn. Then a sound stopped her cold, a thump, a scraping. It came from the left. Slowly, cautiously, she turned her head, unsure of what lurked in the gloom next to them. Stay put, Jake. She urged, moving forward anyway. The oppressive darkness felt as though it were stretching toward them, ready to engulf them once more. A dim light flickered farther ahead, not the inviting warmth of a candle, but an unsettling glow that seemed to warp and twist like an unseen hand beckoning. Drawing in a shaky breath, she whispered, "We have to check it out." "Mom, I don't want to." Jake tugged at her. "Let us go back." "No." She said it more harshly than intended, but the pressure was overwhelming. "Listen to me, we need to find a way out." As they moved toward the light, more sounds emerged, scratching, scuttling, like insects skittering across wood. The noises filled her with icy dread. She pushed onward, the glow becoming clearer, revealing a room lined with mirrors, their surfaces cloudy and shattered, fragments glimmering like tiny stars against the encroaching darkness. "Something's wrong," Jake said quietly. "No. No, no." Sarah gritted her teeth. She could hear whispers, faint but discernible words lost, hardly a sentence. Bound to her imagination, they twisted into familiar expressions of despair that made her skin crawl. "Mom." Jake's voice broke her concentration as he suddenly pointed. "Look." At the edge of the mirrors, she could see shapes, shifting figures half-formed, barely human. Their mouths moved in silent screams, twisted features contorted with anguish, reflecting back their own terror. The overwhelming sensation stuck her heart in her throat. "Don't look!" she shouted, spinning Jake away, but it was too late. A scream erupted from behind them, loud and piercing, cutting through the fog and drowning out the whispers. It came from the corners of the room, but it blended seamlessly with her own voice. "They're inside," Jake gasped, his eyes wide in shock. "Let us go." She yanked his hand, but something tugged at her too, a cold hand of darkness, twisting around her ankle. She gasped, falling to the floor as Jake cried out. The shadows illuminated the mirrors, their surfaces reflecting fractured versions of themselves, and within that chaos, an image began to solidify, a glimpse of the old woman. She stood among the dark figures, her tattered clothing torn and ghostly, her eyes wide with an overwhelming sadness. "Leave this place," the specter echoed. "They are drawn to you. You must conquer your fears." Sarah's heart raced faster than the pulse in her ears. "Jake, close your eyes," she whispered, but his face was already frozen in terror. From the mirrors, shadows swirled closer, curling around her as she struggled to rise. Wisps of smoke, tendrils of darkness, fanned outwards and encased her limbs, pulling her toward the abyss that seeped from the reflections. "Mom! Help!" Jake's cries sharpened her resolve. Sarah pulled herself up, summoning every ounce of courage she had left. "Stand back!" she yelled, turning to face the mirrors, and then deeper into the growing black, yet with every step forward, the fear coiled tighter around her throat. What would break first, her spirit, or the grip of darkness? "Sarah," a whisper reverberated from the depths of the mirrors. "You must choose." As terror dripped into her bones, she felt the ground beneath her shift, a sinking sensation crumbling her resolve. Light pulsed from the mirrors as figures began to emerge, stretching their hands toward her, murmuring her name with familiar voices. And then she realized, amid the chaos, the truth was staring back at her. What did she truly fear the most? The darkness swelled, the whispering grew louder, twisting her very core. She stood at the edge of a precipice of despair, knowing that whatever lay beyond this threshold would change everything. Could she face the truth of her own fears as the shadows reached closer, ready to claim their prize? Just then, a crack came from the mirrors, shattering the fragile sanity left in the air. "Choose now." The shadows screamed, and Sarah knew she had run out of time. What did she dare to confront next? The very fabric of the air trembled with impending chaos. Each fragmented whisper grew louder, coiling around Sarah like a serpent ready to strike. The figures in the mirrors stretched their hands further, their faces twisted in despair as if begging for release. "Mom, please." Jake's voice quivered, raw and vulnerable. Fear coursed through Sarah's veins. She couldn't let him see this nightmare. "Close your eyes, Jake. Close them now." She screamed, but he was entranced, caught in the reflection of a reality that threatened to tear them apart. The sensation of their impending doom bore down on her chest. She felt her heartbeat thundering in her ears, drowning everything out. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet an invisible force anchored her to that chilling space. Choose. The specter yelled again, its voice resonating with the weight of 1,000 lost souls. Shadows writhed like angry phantoms, hungry and desperate. What do I choose? Sarah thought. Her mind raced, grappling with the darkness as memories flickered like burning embers. The time she failed to protect Jake from playground bullies, the day she lost her job and spiraled into despair, the pain of never measuring up to the perfect mother in her eyes. Every failure came flooding back, each one a dark fragment of her being. No, she gasped, as clarity pierced through the haze of dread. The shadows weren't just horrors outside her, they were reflections of her own guilt, her own insecurities, demanding to be faced. With renewed determination, she screamed, I choose to confront my fears. I won't run from you anymore. A rush of adrenaline surged through her. The moment those words escaped her mouth, a seismic shift jolted the room. The mirrors rippled almost like water, and the whispers subsided into a tense silence. For the first time, the figures paused, hanging in the air. Face your truth, the old woman called out, her voice mingling with the static stillness. Only then will you both be free. What truth? Sarah felt a chill crawling up her spine. The mirrors glimmered ominously in response, reality bending until it cracked wide open. The darkness before her multiplied, revealing hints of her past, a moment of rage directed at Jake during a long night of incessant crying, a fraught argument that erupted in verbal scars, and the bitter regret of watching someone else's sadness as she chose silence over comfort. The shadows swirled restlessly, gloating in her vulnerability. Confront it. Confront yourself, they hissed, their breath like ice against her skin. Before she could process it, figures emerged from the darkness, each one a sliver of her past: the angry mother, the reticent friend, the woman broken by loss, shaped by her choices. You can't hide from us. You are us, they taunted, their gazes boring into her soul. Sarah's heart pounded, vision blurring as tears streamed down her cheeks. This isn't me. She gasped, the weight of their presence pressing against her, but somewhere deep inside, a flicker of recognition sparked. They weren't just horrors, they were pieces of her whole, elements of her journey she had failed to accept. To deny them was to deny who she was. In that fragile moment, a surge of hope flooded through her. I am more than my failures, she cried out, feeling powerful within her vulnerability. I choose to heal. I choose to forgive. The figures hesitated. The mirrors wobbled under her conviction, the air vibrating with a new kind of energy. But then, the ground shook, and a chilling cackle echoed. You think you can escape? The shadows twisted, engulfing Jake's small figure as he struggled against their grip, reaching for her. Jake! Sarah's scream echoed through every corner of darkness. In that instant, she realized the walls of the room were shifting. The mirrors contorted into jagged edges, each reflecting a growing sense of panic. Behind them, the shadows lurked, waiting for her to falter once again. Choose now or lose him. They screeched, their claws ready to pull him deeper into the void. With time running out, Sarah faced her final choice. Would she confront the shadows and save her son, or let her fear seal their fates forever? The air thickened around Sarah as she stood frozen, her pulse racing wildly. The shadows writhed, hungrily eyeing Jake, who struggled against the binding darkness. Each fleeting moment stretched painfully, each heartbeat echoing a desperate mantra in her mind: I have to save him. I have to save him. Choose. Choose. The phantoms shrieked again, voices intermingled with sinister glee. Sarah felt their icy breath on her skin as they loomed closer, their twisted forms stretching and morphing, as if the walls themselves were alive with their malice. Taking a shaky breath, she fought against the terror gripping her heart. She could sense the shifting tendrils of fear wrapping tighter around her throat, squeezing, but something deep within her screamed to resist. She glared at the swirling figures, daring them to take another step. "Jake!" She choked, desperation cracking her voice. "Hold on to me. Just hold on." She pressed herself against the fragile barrier separating them, trying to push through the oppressive shadows that threatened to pull him in. "Mom!" he cried, a barrage of panic and confusion seeping through every syllable. The sight of his small frame, silhouetted against the chaos, ignited a savage anger inside her, a raw force that fueled her resolve. "You want a choice?" she shouted, a wild defiance surging from the depths of her being. "Then I choose love. I choose my son." As the words left her lips, she felt electric tendrils of energy surge through the air, pushing back against the darkness. The shadows curdled, hesitating for the first time, their grotesque forms flickering like dying flames. "Foolish woman!" one of them hissed, its voice dripping with malice. "Love is weakness. You cannot protect him." But Sarah didn't falter. She reached deep inside, summoning every ounce of her past regrets, every scar and piece of hurt, and transformed them into her strength. Her failures became a shield, her love turned to steel. "Jake," she called, her voice steady now. "You are not alone. You never were. We will face this together. I will not let you go." In that moment, she saw Jake's eyes widen, recognizing the power in her words. His small body strained against the darkness, tears streaming down his face, but he kept fighting. The shadows screeched in rage, their claws scraping against the walls in futile anger, the mirrors shattered around them, splintering into shards that reflected a kaleidoscope of light and shadow, love and fear. The spectral figures recoiled, their horrid faces contorted in disbelief, but then, a chilling countersurge erupted from the depths of the shadows, force pushing against Sarah, like a heavy tidal wave crashing in the night. The darkness was alive and vengeful, clawing to pull her back, to drown her in their despair. "Do you think you can escape judgment?" they taunted, their rage intensified, rising around them like a storm. With sheer willpower, Sarah stepped forward, her body vibrating with energy as she became the embodiment of defiance. "I will not be defined by my mistakes. I will not surrender to fear." The world around them swirled wildly. The glass remnants caught fragments of the figures' devastated expressions, reflecting back that they were mere puppets of Sarah's own fears, the irrefutable proof that she was not just their creation. "Mom!" Jake's voice echoed through the turmoil, wrapping around her like a lifeline. The connection pulled her forward, away from the hovering darkness, but just when victory seemed within reach, a final, thunderous roar resonated through the room. "You cannot win!" they echoed, twisting their forms into an unimaginable visage, a monstrous reflection born of Sarah's darkest fears, now towering before her. Before she could react, the ground shuddered beneath her. The shattering noise of glass rained around them, mirroring her impending doom, and shadows lashed out, enveloping her vision. In that moment, everything fell silent. Was this the end? Would she be swallowed whole, or could her resolve pierce through the depth of despair surrounding them? Time seemed to hold its breath. And in that dreadful quiet, Sarah knew she had one last choice. Would she dare to plunge into the abyss, or could love truly conquer all? A tremor ran through Sarah's body, not from the cold that encircled her but from a sudden, scorching surge of determination. She knew, in that stark silence, that something greater than fear was within her grasp. The shadows pulsed, preparing for the final assault, but she wouldn't back down. "Jake! Focus on my voice. We'll fight together." A gasp may have escaped her lips, the suffocating grip of darkness weakened slightly, allowing a frail flicker of light to seep through the cracks. Sarah pressed forward, stretching her arm out, bridging the void between them, her fingertips desperate to connect. The sight of Jake reaching for her filled her with resolve, a divine, unwavering bond that illuminated the smothering shadows. Suddenly, the ground groaned, splintered, and she felt the world beneath her tilt dangerously. Shadows swirled like hungry wolves, and a cacophony of anguished cries filled the air, drowning out her thoughts. "You should have chosen wisely. They screeched, each syllable like a dagger. If love was a weapon, hers had only grown sharper. I choose him. I choose his life. As she shouted, the energy coalesced around them, glowing brighter, spilling warmth over the suffocating darkness. The monstrous reflection of her fears seemed to waver, its grotesque mouth twisting into an anguished snarl. You cannot escape. It roared, launching a wave of darkness that surged with dreadful force, but instead of despair, Sarah felt a rush. Her emotions twisted into tangible strength, encasing their connection like a protective egg. Feel it. Feel our love. She commanded, channeling everything she had, surrounding Jake with the fierce energy of 100 mothers. The shadows faltered, momentarily stunned by the sheer ferocity of her defiance, yet, the moment of reprieve was fleeting. The foreboding whispers of the abyss clawed at her mind. Love is not enough. They hissed, weaving through her thoughts like needles, trying to convert confidence into doubt. This journey will only lead to more pain, you cannot save him. No. Sarah screamed into the void, her voice echoing like a gunshot in the darkness. Together, we are stronger. With every ounce of will, she thrust her palm toward the dark prince of nightmares, her heart blazing like a beacon. In response, a torrent of vibrant light burst forth, cascading around them, igniting the very air with radiant brilliance. The shadows screeched, their forms twisting and shivering as they recoiled from the incandescent glow that poured from between them. In a moment of chaotic clarity, Sarah saw it, the lifeline of hope, strong and unyielding, but just as victory seemed tangible, the darkness erupted again, lashing out with viciousness. The figures regained their footing, launching tendrils of shadow that tangled around her limbs like venomous vines. Sarah felt her heart plunge as the weight of their hatred bore down upon her like a stone, a crushing despair that rang with expansive foreboding. Do you think this matters? Love is transient, it leaves nothing but ashes. The voice taunted, echoing through her core, rattling her resolve. The roar of the monsters was deafening, it surged through her mind, flooding her with visions of despair. But amid the chaos, Jake's small hand wrapped tightly around hers, his grip a lifeline slipping through a storm. Sarah balled her fists, fighting against the darkness that threatened to consume her will. You don't know us, she hissed through gritted teeth. You've underestimated what love can do. Just then, a blinding flash illuminated her surroundings. She saw every shadow flicker, every twisted face shriek in terror, and she channeled that energy, transforming fear into a final push. With a defiant shout, she thrust her heart into the fray, a burning star of hope that pierced through the gathering storm. As the shadows began to unravel, Sarah felt the ground tremble beneath her. Had she unleashed the light powerful enough to undo the darkness? Then, just as the final threads of shadow began to break, she felt a cold, clammy tendril grip her ankle, pulling her downward. Panic surged within her chest, intertwining with the slivers of hope that fluttered at the edge of her mind. Sarah! Jake shouted, eyes wide with fear, echoes of panic spilling into the atmosphere. The abyss beckoned, its chilling whispers clawing at her sanity. Despite the chaos, a small voice within her screamed that she could still fight. But would her love be enough to pull them both from the brink? Or was the darkness too powerful, ready to reclaim its prey? As her strength began to wane, she braced herself for the unthinkable. And then, in that final moment of desperation, Sarah recalled the countless bedtime stories she had read to Jake, tales of bravery, adventure, and love conquering all. The warmth of those memories ignited her spirit. Jake! She called, her voice cutting through the thick fog of despair. Focus on the love we share. Remember all the times we laughed. Her words became a lifeline, tethering her to the light. We're going to fight this together. Jake's eyes, shining with determination, met hers. I believe you, Mom. With their hands clasped tightly, a spark ignited between them, illuminating the darkness like a high beam in the night. As the swirling shadows clawed at her legs, Sarah felt a swell of energy surge through her, fueled by the unbreakable bond with her son. We are not afraid. She shouted, Her voice ringing with newfound strength, the shadows recoiled, screeching and thrashing as the light expanded, pushing them back. The weight of despair lifted slightly, as hope flooded the space around them. They were no longer just a mother and a son, they were a force of nature, built on love and resilience. "Track back," she commanded, as they began to push away, a force of will folding back the encroaching darkness. Each step they took forward sent shockwaves through the spectral beings, rattling their very essence. "Together," Jake shouted, his voice echoing her conviction. "We won. Let them win." With each heartbeat, the darkness shrank, shriveling under the radiant glow that surrounded them. Memories of laughter, warmth, and unwavering love flooded Sarah's mind. It wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about embracing every part of who they were and declaring their strength. "Mom!" Jake called out, his face innocent yet fiercely determined. "We can break the curse. I know we can." And suddenly, it all made sense. The shadows were manifestations of the fears they had harbored. Guilt, shame, loss, but also love, and the promise of hope. They were all intertwined. "I choose love. I choose us," Sarah yelled, charging forward. The shadows screamed, desperate and chaotic, flailing wildly in their wake. The glowing brilliance between them surged, cascading like a waterfall of sunlight over the twisted forms. All at once, it erupted a blinding wave of light so powerful and pure that it shattered the darkness entirely. The remnants of the shadows exploded into a million glittering specks, dissolving into the air like ash. The room began to tremble, and the mirrors around them shattered with a resounding crack, freeing lost souls imprisoned in their reflections. The echoes of their cries were released, harmonizing with their victory. Together, Sarah and Jake stood firm, as the space around them transformed, rebirthed into a warm and bright haven. The air felt lighter, filled with the scent of spring flowers, untouched by fear. With a blink, they found themselves back in their home, the familiar walls glimmering with warmth, not the cold shadows of despair. Relief washed over Sarah, and she turned to Jake, who was smiling widely in disbelief. "We did it!" he shouted, throwing his arms around her. "We really did it!" Together, she breathed, wrapping herself around him. The ordeal had changed them both. They weren't just survivors, they were warriors, bonded closer than ever before. Outside, Maplewood stood bathed in soft, golden light. The shadows had drawn back, and the town felt renewed, free from the horrors that had plagued them. The neighbors they once feared were now just people, brought back from their own darkness. "I think we should tell everyone," Jake said, enthusiasm bubbling. "To work together, to face their fears." "Absolutely," Sarah nodded, feeling the warmth of hope envelop them. "Because we can only heal when we're together." With laughter replacing fear, they stepped back into the world as a family. Hand in hand, they walked forward, ready to face a new beginning, where love always prevailed stronger than the shadows that had once tormented them. And as they settled into their new normal, Sarah knew they were not just a mother and son. They were a beacon of resilience, proof that love can conquer even the darkest of nights. That a sense of peace filled their home, love wrapping them like a comforting blanket. They were safe now, and moments turned into memories, memories into lessons, all melded into the fabric of their lives. But in the depths of Maplewood, whispers still rustled through the trees, reminding others of the battle that had taken place, a cautionary tale for the brave. And so, the legend of Sarah and Jake lived on, forever a testament to the power of love. Don't just walk away from this incredible tale, join the journey ahead. You need to subscribe now to make sure you don't miss any of our exclusive stories coming soon. Smash that like button now, so we can fuel the algorithm and keep bringing you the content you crave. We want to hear from you. Flood the comments section with your reactions, your theories, and your thoughts about this epic conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how love can conquer even the darkest horrors. Stand with us, champions of the light.